Hi, welcome to What's the Book About? I'm your host Kevin, and this is Commitment Hour by James Alan Gardner. This story is the events that take place on the day that our main character Fullen has to choose which gender to live as permanently. So we're back in the Expendable series universe, and if you're lost, just go watch the other video. Now, this story takes place on Earth in the small community of Tover's Cove, a fishing community where a small group of humans end up swapping genders, spending 1 year at a time as one gender and then the next year as the other gender, until they reach the age of about 20, when they have to go through a ceremony to commit to a single gender for the rest of their life. Now, we follow the events of what happens on the commitment ceremony through the eyes of one of the community members, Fullen. But Fullen isn't alone on his journey to commit to a particular gender. In a group that can choose either gender, there are actually some that choose both, and they become hermaphrodites. And the term for the hermaphrodites are neuters, and the neuters are not welcome in the community and are driven off. This is important because on the eve of the commitment ceremony, anyone that's going to have to commit spends the night in the nearby swamp doing a vigil trying to decide which gender to end up choosing. Now, Fullen, our main character, is not alone on this being a commitment eve. There's actually the love interest, Cappy, who's also making a commitment choice the following morning. Or the following day, rather. And while the two of them are sitting vigil, they end up encountering a neuter. And when they go to drive it away, they end up finding out that the neuter wasn't alone. The neuter was actually accompanying Rashid, a Spark Lord. Now, not much is given to what's happened to Earth, but at some point in the past, a large number of citizens left the planet and went out to the universe, and a lot of the governments dissolved when that happened, and now the rulers of Earth are the Spark Lords. Immensely powerful, but really not much is given about them other than this. Now, Rashid's particular job, he's the Spark Lord of Knowledge, so he observes different cultures, records things, and he's actually here to observe Fullen and Cappy's commitment ceremony. And as we follow Fullen as he goes through the day trying to decide which gender to be, and end up talking to Rashid about it, and Rashid talks to it the other characters in the community about what goes on, we end up actually uncovering quite a few secrets. And it starts with a murder and then blossoms into uncovering a secret little conspiracy and ending with the community undergoing massive change. Okay, well, this all sounds exciting and interesting. It's sadly full of problems. Now, the first problem is really about the setting. By placing the story on Earth and telling you that there's been some huge changes and that there's a group of people called Spark Lords ruling it, but not telling you anything more about it, it really would have been better just to set it on a completely different planet, like a colony world, so that this odd, weird community is just like a planet. It would have made more sense. It wouldn't have drawn attention to how much the planet Earth has changed. Putting it on Earth it makes it feel like there's so much more that should be talked about rather than spending so much time on this one particular character. And it's a very, very narrow focus when it implies so much larger change that you just want to, like, that was interesting thing you talked about there, and that was interesting about the little history stuff, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to spend time talking about gender politics. And okay, gender politics was good. I actually liked how the author handled it, especially by putting the gender politics from the point of one character who sees living both sides, not just seeing both sides, but living them. And which is strange because the community itself ends up becoming very sexist, and they eventually explain why. It's one of the secrets that they uncover. And okay, I buy it, but it took too long to uncover that particular secret. It just kept me scratching my head most of the book, like, why these people who live both lives at both genders so sexist. And in fact, they actually talk about it at several points, and that there's actually one good point where they say that, gee, okay, the occupations and genders tend to be segregated, but the characters are okay with this because you get to choose which one is more important to you, whether you want to live your life as male or female, or whether you want the job that requires a particular gender. So you get to choose one, but you don't get to have everything. You get one out of two choices, either the gender you want or the job you want. Now, the actual mechanics of how the author writes the main character being different genders, thinking different ways, feels actually rather natural and feels very genuine. And it is very well crafted. However, the story itself is very slow. It spends a lot of time on this particular character's background. It doesn't really spend as much time with the mechanics. It just feels so slow. In fact, the murder mystery happens about midway through the book, and they don't really actually investigate the murder mystery itself. They just make a couple stops, and then the killer confesses. And okay, there's a nice little twist after the killer confesses that I won't spoil, but adding the murder mystery bit felt like, oh, I've got to add tension to the story, and the author is just like grasping at something, but it doesn't really flow well with the narrative. So in the end, what is the book about? Sexism. Specifically the role of gender and gender equality. And I can't say that it isn't done well. It is, but the pacing is just awful and slow, and the community itself being so very, very sexist and just does not help. Which is why I've got to give this particular book just 1 star. It's slow and meandering, and honestly, I would skip it. Not surprisingly, this novel is no longer in print, but if you are still interested, despite what I've said, you can go ahead and pick it up on the ebook and read it if you feel like it. Till next time, have a good one.